Invincible just lied to you, and almost nobody caught it. That post-credit scene in Season 4, Episode 6 wasn't just a tease, it wasn't just suspense. It was a deliberate psychological trick designed to exploit everything the show has trained you to believe. And if you fell for it, even for a second, you experience exactly what the creators wanted. Because this isn't about Conquest. This is about something much bigger. This is the moment Invincible quietly changed how death works in its universe, and if you didn't notice it, you're going to miss what happens next. Now, before we break that down, let's quickly reset the situation, because context here is everything. Conquest was never just another Viltrumite. From the moment he was introduced, he felt different, more brutal, more relentless, less controlled. He wasn't fighting for strategy or even for victory. He fought because he enjoyed it. And that alone made him one of the most dangerous threats Mark has ever faced. Even after their first encounter, where Mark pushed himself to the absolute edge just to survive, Conquest didn't die. That alone should have told you something. This wasn't a villain you defeat once and move on from. He lingered, he endured, and when he escaped from the GDA and rejoined the Viltrumite forces, it wasn't a question of if he'd return, it was a question of how much damage he'd cause when he did. And Season 4 answered that question immediately. The ambush on the Coalition ship wasn't just another battle, it was a statement. The Viltrumites weren't backing down, and Conquest was at the center of that chaos. When he grabbed Oliver and started crushing his skull, the show made one thing painfully clear. There were no limits to how far he would go. This wasn't intimidation, this wasn't strategy, this was pure destruction. And if Nolan hadn't stepped in at that exact moment, Oliver would have died right there. But even that intervention didn't solve the problem, it delayed it, because Conquest didn't stop, he followed. And when he descended to the planet after Oliver, the situation escalated from dangerous to inevitable. That's when Mark stepped in. Now, here's where things get interesting, because this fight is completely different from their first encounter. The first time Mark fought Conquest, he was overwhelmed, outmatched, surviving more than fighting. But this time, Mark understood exactly what he was dealing with. He knew Conquest wouldn't stop. He knew there was no negotiation, no escape, no second chances. This wasn't about winning. This was about ending it. And even with that mindset, Mark still almost died. Again. Conquest tore into him with the same savage intensity, pushing him beyond his limits, breaking him down piece by piece. It's brutal, it's uncomfortable, and it reminds you that even now, Mark is still not the strongest force in this war. But what changed isn't Mark's strength, it's his approach. Instead of trying to overpower Conquest, Mark does something smarter and more desperate. He commits to a single decisive move. He grabs him, and he doesn't let go. The chokehold isn't flashy, it isn't heroic, it's raw, ugly, and effective. And more importantly, it shows growth. Mark isn't trying to match Conquest blow for blow anymore. He's trying to win by any means necessary, even if it costs him everything. And that's exactly what it almost does, because while Mark is holding on, Conquest is tearing him apart. This isn't a clean victory. This is survival at its absolute limit. But Mark endures. He pushes through. And finally, he does what once seemed impossible. He snaps Conquest's neck. And just like that, one of the most terrifying Viltrumites in the series is gone. No ambiguity, no escape, no second round. He's dead. Or, at least that's what the show wants you to believe. Because then comes the post-credit scene, and this is where everything changes. The camera slowly zooms in on Conquest's grave, the music builds, the atmosphere shifts. Every single element of that scene is designed to trigger one thought in your head. He's coming back. And why wouldn't you think that? This show has conditioned you to expect it. Time and time again, Invincible has pulled this exact trick. Characters who seem dead aren't. Threats that seem finished return. Angstrom Levy is the perfect example. What looked like a definitive end turned into one of the biggest conflicts in the entire series. The Sequids came back. The Flaxans came back. Over and over again, the show has reinforced one idea. Death is temporary. So when you see that grave, your brain doesn't question it. You accept it. Of course, this is a setup. Of course, something is about to happen. And then, nothing happens. The music cuts. The camera pulls away. The moment ends. And just like that, Invincible flips everything on its head. Because this wasn't a tease. It was a test. A test to see if you're still thinking in the old rules of the show, or if you're ready for what it's becoming. Because by doing absolutely nothing, the series is actually telling you something incredibly important. Conquest is not coming back. And more than that, not everyone will. This is the shift. This is the moment where Invincible quietly removes its biggest safety net. Up until now, there's always been a sense, whether conscious or not, that death in this world isn't permanent, that somehow, some way, characters can return, and that safety net changes how you watch the show. It softens the impact, it lowers the stakes. But this scene, it cuts that safety net completely, because now you don't know anymore. Now, when someone dies, you have to consider the possibility that they're gone for good. And that changes everything. It changes how you view every fight, every injury, every sacrifice, because suddenly the consequences are real again. And that's exactly why bringing Conquest back would have been a mistake. Think about it. What would his return actually accomplish? Another fight with Mark? Another brutal showdown? We've already seen that. Twice, and both times it worked because it felt meaningful, because it pushed Mark forward, because it left an impact. But a third time? That's not escalation, that's repetition, and repetition kills tension. If Conquest came back again, he wouldn't feel unstoppable anymore. He'd feel predictable. And the moment a villain becomes predictable, they stop being scary. Instead, by keeping him dead, the show preserves what made him special. He remains a symbol of raw, overwhelming power, a reminder of how dangerous the Viltrumites really are. And more importantly, his death becomes something significant, not just another temporary setback. Because Conquest isn't just any Viltrumite, he's one of their strongest, which means his death isn't just personal, it's strategic. This is the first major casualty on the Viltrumite side, and that matters more than you might think. Because wars aren't just fought with strength, they're fought with perception. And right now, the perception is shifting. For the Coalition, this is proof that the Viltrumites aren't invincible, that they can be beaten, that they can fall, and that kind of belief spreads fast. It builds momentum, it creates resistance, it turns hope into hope, and hope in a war like this is dangerous. At the same time, this loss also impacts the Viltrumites, because even if they don't show it, losing someone like Conquest isn't insignificant. It exposes vulnerability, it introduces doubt, and in a society built on strength and dominance, even a crack in that image can have consequences. But the most important impact is on Mark, because this isn't just another victory for him, this is proof that he's changing. The Mark that fought Conquest the first time was reactive, emotional, overwhelmed. But the Mark that wins this fight is different. He's focused, strategic, willing to do whatever it takes to end the threat in front of him. And that evolution is critical, because as this war continues, Mark isn't going to face easier opponents. He's going to face worse, stronger, smarter, more ruthless. And the only way he survives that is by becoming something closer to them. And that's the real tension of the story, because every step Mark takes to win brings him closer to the very thing he's fighting against, and Conquest's death is part of that transformation. But there's one more layer to this, and it's what makes this entire moment so effective. Conquest didn't lose because he was weaker. He lost because he was arrogant. From the beginning, he underestimated Mark. He saw him as inferior, predictable, beatable. And even as the fight progressed, even as Mark started pushing back, Conquest never fully adjusted. He relied on the same approach, the same mindset. And that's what cost him. Because while Conquest stayed the same, Mark didn't. And in the end, that difference is what decided the fight. It's a perfect conclusion to his character, not a twist, not a surprise, just the inevitable result of who he is. And that's why it works. And that's why it needs to stay final. Because bringing him back would undo his death. It would undo the meaning behind it. It would tell the audience that nothing truly matters, that no matter what happens, everything can be reversed. And Invincible is clearly moving away from that. That post-credit scene proves it. It sets you up for the familiar pattern and then denies it completely. And in doing so, it tells you something far more important than any resurrection ever could. The rules have changed. This is no longer a story where you can rely on second chances. This is a story where actions have consequences, permanent ones. So the next time you watch a fight in Invincible, you're going to feel it differently. Because now, when a character is on the edge, you won't be thinking about how they survive. You'll be thinking about what happens if they don't. And that tension, that uncertainty, that fear, that's what makes this shift so powerful. So no, Conquest is not coming back. That scene wasn't setting up his return. It was closing the door on it. And at the same time, opening a much darker one. Because if someone like Conquest can stay dead, then nobody is safe anymore. Not the side characters, not the heroes,